Hey everybody, it's Dee from CatalystEnergies. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is your daily catalyst for January 2nd, 2020. It seems really bizarre to be saying that, but it is, and cliche. I feel like everybody has been saying, I can't believe we got here. But I really can't believe that we got here. It is bizarre to say 2020. This is going to be the daily for the day after New Year's Day, 2020. And after I film this, I'm going to be doing a live stream on Facebook that is a card reading, a Akashic and Thoth Tarot reading for the 2020 year ahead. But I feel like what is happening at the end of the first, January 1st into January 2nd with the moon in Aries is really kind of setting the tone for the rest of the year in terms of what is it that we're going to choose to align with. But before that though, we do need to understand what is going on within us, how we can acknowledge ourselves in terms of the larger collective and still work towards the benefit of other people without sacrificing what it is that we actually need, because ultimately the goal is to blend those things together into a mutually beneficial relationship. That is the ideal, that we don't have to compromise ourselves in order to be of service to the community and vice versa. So the moon is in Aries today, all day. She's going to be transiting all day in Aries. And she moved into Aries on the 1st. And this initiated a new cycle within ourselves as well as outside of ourselves with the new year and the new decade. And we may be really feeling drive and ambition to move forward in that realm. She conjuncted with Chiron just the day prior here as her first order of business in Aries. And this may also have been stimulating a strong urge to acknowledge that wound, the wounded divine masculine, the original wound of coming into form. And especially in Aries, this is a wound around, do we even deserve to exist? Who am I to even have a wound? So, and Aries is a very masculine energy. It's the emperor in the tarot, and it's the seed point in the zodiacal wheel. It is the beginning of the growth cycle and represents the ego. And the ego is not something that we need to resist or fight against or get rid of. It is a very necessary part of our psyche, and it is how we survive. And right now with Chiron going through Aries and moving forward in Aries, we're really getting an opportunity to acknowledge that part of ourselves and where our wounding is when it comes to who we are, how we identify ourselves, and our role within everything else. With the moon as a representative of our inner feminine and nurturer, the moon being the ruler of Cancer, I really feel like this moon could offer a very real opportunity to just be present with and validate that experience of Chiron and Aries, you know. The container for our emotional vulnerability sometimes is nothing more than just holding space for it. And I think the moon here in Aries is, there is this passion and this fire and this ambition behind it, but the moon kind of, I wouldn't say tempers it necessarily, but does still provide that container to hold that and acknowledge that there is a seed point and that there is an ego and that there is an I that needs to be nurtured and just seen for what it is. And so I think the moon can really give us that nurturing container for understanding that wound within ourselves. So starting on the 2nd though, we have Mercury and Jupiter right here conjuncting between 7 and 8 degrees of Capricorn. The Sabian symbol for this is the birds in the house are singing happily. There's this idea that there is establishment to what we have built so far, to the point where, you know, I kind of get this feeling about the birds being kind of domesticated, right? Because Capricorn is the structures that we create in very material form. In some ways, they can be very stifling because they are kind of closing around and providing structure from the outside. In Capricorn, it is material earth, and so it's like what we actually build. And so, but the birds are happy. they have a home. And so you could think about it as like a house, you could think about it as a bird house. Either way, there is a sense of some sort of structure being established. And so this is where Mercury and Jupiter are actually going to conjunct today. There is an establishment of security that not only has been expanding with Jupiter's placement in this degree, because Jupiter moves so slowly, much slower than Mercury. The messenger is going to amplify that experience in her thoughts and ideas. Capricorn tends to be very serious and focused on the long-term structures meant to last in a very material way. So there are likely going to be very serious discussions about ways to bring this vision into actual form. Jupiter's still all about the big picture, and the first decan, or the first 10 degrees of Capricorn, is ruled by Jupiter in the tarot. So we need to stoke the fire and get it really hot in order to transmute energy. In order to perform alchemy, there needs to be enough energy to actually catalyze the reaction. Now that we have gotten it hot enough, Jupiter and representing, you know, the expansiveness and like the mutable fire, the coal fire that can be stoked at any time. We have stoked it and it's gotten hot, and now we're actually doing the thing with the fire. So we're blowing glass, we're smithing the metal, we're creating the potion. So Mercury is kind of like the actual spell itself, or using symbols and language and vibration of sound to enact magic. It's like the recipe, the actual recipe, or the logistical process for doing the work of transmutation, of creating something material. And so bringing these two pieces together, I think it would be beneficial to be clear about what this actually is for us individually and collectively, because the moon is making squares to all of this Capricorn energy today. So here's our moon here, and this big red bold line is definitely about squares, and it's going to square everything. It's going to square Mercury and Jupiter. It's going to square the nodes. It's going to square mostly Jupiter and then the sun. This is what the squares are going to happen today. And so today we'll end with the first quarter square in the lunar cycle, which is crisis in action. It is the first square after the new moon has happened. And so it's this first point of resistance. And especially because we're in between eclipses, this is going to be even more important to pay attention to. Let's see here. The reason that Aries squares Capricorn is because they're both cardinal energies. So both of them are about forward momentum, but one is about fire and represents the point of the self, you know, the creation of the self, while the other is earth and represents what we are building for all of us, not just ourselves. The moon is the representation of us as we are, and her presence in Aries certainly stimulates feelings that focus mostly on the I as opposed to the we in the long run. She also could be drawing our attention to the fact that we still need to nurture that inner child and divine masculine, rather than always giving it up to the Capricorn boss man. It's very easy to just like constantly be a workaholic, or to always go back to that responsibility, or to that very deterministic frame of mind, and not acknowledge ourselves at all and who we are. And I think that the squares are going to give us an opportunity to feel where that tension is. The tension, we're going to feel it all day, and it's going to manifest as an actual crisis of something by the end of the day. The first quarter square is usually a crisis in action, like I said, rather than consciousness. So it's likely that something dramatic can erupt in order to bring about the crisis that actually needs the attention. So we're looking at our moon in Aries squaring the sun in Capricorn. It happens every month with the lunar cycle, and it has a different focus depending on the rest of the chart at that time. So where exactly is the sun? Well, he is in a degree in Capricorn that has to do with how much acquiring the knowledge about how nature functions and how we can use that knowledge. The laws of nature are the same no matter how you feel about them or how you feel like you're affected by them. And the way to really harness the moon today really depends on how all this stuff is aspected in your own natal chart. And so this is why it's really important to get a reading, because your chart is like a blueprint for the soul's intention. So these collective experiences will have a signature frequency for each individual person. This gives you the tools to make conscious choices about how to address the energy rather than feel like a victim to it. So this moon in Aries could very well amp up that victimhood energy if we're not leaning into the discomfort from the squares to Capricorn. Just remember, Mercury and Jupiter right here are actually casting the spell, giving us the recipe, giving us the logistical readout about how to build, do the actual, what it is we're transmuting into. What spell are you casting for the year ahead and for your life ahead? I mean, that is kind of the basic idea. And so there is this idea, there is this energy of choice right now. And so I think this is really going to play out today very, very much within us, and very much within how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our role in the collective and what we're building. And there's going to be a lot of tension between what we're building in the long run and how we feel about who we are. And like I said, leaning into that discomfort is going to be the fastest way to growth and the best way to harness the energy and then use it for what you ultimately are here to do. So that's your daily catalyst for January 2nd, 2020. I will see you tomorrow on the 3rd for the weekend report. And I'm going to go do a live video right now and pull some, flip some tarot cards over and get some sense of 2020 from a more intuitive, archetypal perspective. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for subscribing, for checking it out. I added an astrological reading for the year ahead onto my services on Facebook, so check out the description box below to get all the contact details, and I will catch you on the next video. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.